So hello, everyone. I'm Angelica Diggs. So I'm the executive director of the Montclair History Center. I know many of you, for those who I do not know, I worked for the History Center previously for almost 7 years, and then returned in this past August in my new capacity. So happy to be here tonight. As I said quite a few times already, and some people already know, if you're more than 20 miles away or more than one person, just kindly put that in the chat for us tonight. It's really great information for grant reporting for us. There are many ways to support the Montclair History Center and our History at Home programs. We bring them to you free. And any programs you missed, we also record and put on our YouTube channel. You can find that right on the homepage of our website. And also we have quite a lot of holiday programs coming up. And we're happy to have Rich Rockwell here tonight, who's doing our last 2022 History at Home series, and we'll revive our series coming up again after the new year. So I'm just going to go ahead and put those links in the chat for you. So tonight, Rich Rockwell, who many of you know, is from the Historical Society of Bloomfield, presenting a new program on the history of the Garden State Parkway and its impact on our area. Rich has lived in Montclair and Bloomfield for almost 30 years, authored Bloomfield Through Time, which many of us are familiar with, and has become an expert regarding the Morris Canal in Bloomfield, and is also a councilman at large as well in Bloomfield, and serves on the Bloomfield Morris Canal Greenway Committee. And many other organizations, which I'm sure Rich will mention some other information about. Rich has given presentations with us before, one of which you can also find on our YouTube channel. So we're thrilled to have him here with us tonight. So Rich, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you. And when you're ready, we can go ahead and get your screen share and presentation up on the screen. So thank you, everyone, and looking forward to the program tonight.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm going to get started. So welcome, everybody. I'm Rich Rockwell. I started, my inspiration for working on the Garden State Parkway, let's see. So you're seeing my screen share now?
Yes, screen is good. Thanks, Rich.
My buttons aren't working. Oh, okay. So my inspiration for doing this was for the late Fred Branch, who was very involved, one of the founders of the Historical Society in Bloomfield. He edited our newsletter for many years, and he wrote an article called "Millions for Demolition, but Not 1 Cent for Preservation." He was a real curmudgeon about the Garden State Parkway. He was very disappointed that it was built and that so many houses were demolished. And I learned a lot from him about the houses that were demolished. By the way, if you have questions, we'll have time for questions at the end of the program too. You can either put them in chat, or we'll have an opportunity for people to ask questions. So most of what I learned about the Parkway was from studying photographs and maps, and I did a lot of research in old newspapers too. So a lot of the 1950s stuff came from newspapers at the time. So just to give you a little context, back in 1900, there were 300 vehicles registered in New Jersey. But by 1960, there were 109,000. 1916, sorry. Then after World War II, in 1945, the population in New Jersey grew twice as fast as the rest of the country, encouraging a consumer culture and unprecedented suburban sprawl. So in that period, between 1940 and 1956, the number of registered vehicles doubled to over 2 million. So, this is more and more cars. By 2003, there were almost 7 million. So, the question of what are we going to do with all these cars came up. So back in 1909, they formed a state highway commission, which was turned into a state highway department in 1917. In 1928, New Jersey had the distinction of having the first clover leaf in the United States, which was in Woodbridge. 1929 to 33 was the Great Depression, so there was not much highway construction at the time. World War I ended in 1945. 1939 had a New York World's Fair, and one of the exhibits there was General Motors Futurama, and they had a World of Tomorrow exhibit. That's the picture in the lower right-hand corner. When I looked at that and thought, oh, they were predicting that this is what how highways would be like in 1960. And I thought, oh, we're never going to have highways that look like that. That's just so wide, so many lanes. And then I thought, oh, wait a minute. I started counting the lanes. Well, that's what the New Jersey Turnpike looks like now. So we achieved that probably a little later than 1960, but that's pretty much modern highways look like that. You need quite a bit of space for them. So they started this Parkway and Freeway Act in 1945, which was the part of the impetus for the Parkway being built. And one of the other things that happened around that time was that the last trolley on Route 29, which was the trolley line that went up Bloomfield Avenue and went in through Montclair also in 1952. That was the last trolley. So they had been planning this highway for many years. They were talking about, they were calling it Route 4, what became the Parkway. This is the master plan from 1947 in Bloomfield. And this was the proposed route. They were also planning a east-west highway that would have been an extension of Route 10. That was never actually, was going to cut through Bloomfield also, but that was never actually built. It's sort of morphed into I-280. So this is the alignment that actually was followed. They were planning some other extensions of streets in the area too. And there was one up in this section was the only place that they changed the alignment slightly. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. So 1950, the first 18-mile section of this Route 4 Parkway was built in Cranford. That was built under the Parkway and Freeway Act of 1945. And in 1952, voters approved a referendum to build the original 165 miles that went from Bergen County, between Bergen County and Cape May counties. By 1954, most of the Parkway was completed. The Bloomfield section was opened in 1955. And by 1956, the whole Parkway was open. And then in 1956, also the Brookdale service area in Bloomfield opened. So some of the design concepts were that they would have limited access, so you didn't have to have grade crossings or traffic lights. They had handsome stone bridges, which were called elastic because they expanded and contracted to adjust to the changes in temperature. And they had landscaped medians and the center islands, and it would be picturesque with no billboards allowed. And one of the ideas behind it was people in North Jersey would be able to get to the shore faster. And they actually planned to have the highway go through major urban centers. Instead of building it on the outskirts and then having to build feeder highways to get to a highway on the outskirts, they built it right through the urban centers so that a third of the state's population lived within 3 miles of the Parkway. Now, they originally claimed that it would improve shopping in Bloomfield, when in fact, I think what happened was it made it more convenient for people to go out of Bloomfield to go shopping in malls and strip malls. And one of the reasons they wanted to build it was to relieve traffic. I mean, one of the things they used to promote it was that it would relieve traffic in Bloomfield, especially Broad Street. So in October of 1952, they actually planned a referendum and were asking people to vote whether they would support this or not. And the whole idea was, I mean, that you wouldn't have to pay. There were no tax money was being used to build the highway. It was all going to be park as you ride. People who used it were going to pay for it, and they weren't going to use any tax money. So they were promoting this idea because it had to be voted on. And they created a movie which was called Your Garden State Parkway, an 18-minute movie that they were making available to public organizations to really promote the idea of the Parkway. And I happen to have this movie. It's on YouTube. It's not the full 18-minute version, but I'm going to play it for you because it gives you a lot of information about what was going on at the time, what were some of the concepts behind why we needed a parkway. This is a little bit of what you might consider a sort of propaganda piece, encouraging people to agree to having the parkway. Now, I also have to apologize. I don't know if you can hear this, but there's construction work going on outside, really bad timing. They're replacing the gas lines throughout Bloomfield, and the home across the street just had some kind of problem. Mine was done a couple weeks ago, but our street was done, but they had a problem with one of them. Okay, so here goes the movie. It's called Your Garden State Parkway.
Lots of fun, but don't bother looking for us there. Yes, sir, mighty nice family, but that's not us either. Do you want to know where we were on that day? At that very moment? There we are, somewhere down there with thousands of other New Jersey families. We're down there with you. Yep, there we are, or rather, there we were. Took an hour to make just 12 miles. So on that day this past summer, I had plenty of time to think about that pamphlet I found in my car. Tomorrow's best bet, your Garden State Parkway. Spend your time at the beach, not in bumper-to-bumper traffic. Vote yes November 4th for the Parkway. About this, I had to know more. I decided to drop the New Jersey Highway Authority a card when I got home. The next week, I got my answer. I often eat my lunch outside in the summer, and this was a good chance to look at the highway reports the mailman had given me. One was an engineering report which showed the tremendous increase in car and truck use since the war. How it's caused two major congestion problems within New Jersey. The first of these problems was caused by millions of vehicles moving diagonally across the New Jersey corridor from the north, the south, and the west. The result was jammed highways, lost time, accidents, and deaths. The New Jersey Turnpike, carrying 60% out-of-state traffic, has largely solved this problem. Existing state highways along the corridor are now relieved of congestion. But there's still the second problem. We're strangling ourselves inside our state. You and I are caught in this traffic web almost every day. We need relief badly, and it's on the way. To lift this second problem, the New Jersey Highway Authority is going to build the Garden State Parkway, 180 miles of the most modern, safe, and desirable highway in the world. It's going to run from the New York state line down through Bergen, Passaic, Essex, Union, and Middlesex counties, over the American River, through Monmouth, Ocean, and Atlantic counties, all the way to the tip of Cape May. Do you know what that's going to mean to us? For example, let's take an engineer's view of Essex County traffic. These broad bands show the number of vehicles traveling on principal streets. The wider the band, the heavier the traffic. So if you're going north or south through Essex, this is typical of what you're facing. The intersection of Broad, Franklin, and Liberty Streets in Bloomfield. Harrison and Central Avenue on East Orange, looking one way. Clifton and 7th Street, Newark. More than 300,000 vehicles try to move through these general areas every day. But the Essex County traffic pattern will change. When the Garden State Parkway is built, we'll be able to move at 50 miles per hour in comfort and safety. 60 to 80,000 of these 300,000 north-southbound vehicles will be drained off these strangled streets. And those of us not using the Parkway will feel the benefits of relieved congestion. 1,350,000 people live within 3 miles of the Parkway route, right within this shaded area. This is more than 1/3 of our state population. These folks and over 1 million others living in counties along the route will be directly served by the Garden State Parkway. In fact, through our east-west system of connecting state highways, everyone else in the state will benefit by direct access to this great new artery of transportation. I wish that dream highway were completely finished. But all that swell stretch that's already done between Cranford and Woodbridge, boy, what a difference. No stops and starts, no traffic signals, just smooth sailing all the way. And absolutely no grade intersections. The crossroads are all overpassed or underpassed. Just relax and enjoy your driving in comfort and safety. Traffic comes off and on only at well-marked interchanges. What's more, it's a pleasure to ride where it's beautifully landscaped. Cool green woods set aside for picnics. And look at that broad center island. If you have a blowout, there's plenty of space to maneuver. No worry about smashing into traffic from the other direction. And no more of those terrible traffic tensions. For years, I've known we've needed something to get us out of this trap. And boy, this is it. I began to speak to my friends, to anyone who would listen. And everyone listened because we're all in the same jam. At our annual sales picnic, I had a real chance to talk up the Parkway. Naturally, the first question was, how did all this get started? I explained that it began when Governor Driscoll signed the Parkway bill into law.
You know, I'm extremely happy to sign this legislation, making possible the speedy completion of the great Garden State Parkway. It is a vital phase of the most comprehensive highway, parkway, and turnpike program in the history of our Garden State. With it, we shall provide further relief for the traffic jams that hurt our motorists, and make it possible for millions of our citizens to get to the seashore communities of our state into the resort areas, so they can spend more time on the beach and less time in the car.
So nice movie, huh? I love the cars and I love the scene of the completed Parkway. And now, wouldn't after seeing that movie, wouldn't you want a Parkway in your neighborhood? So they did vote. They did approve the referendum that was to build the original 165-mile section. So some of the communities were opposed to it. Bloomfield was not. At least there was no organized. I mean, Fred Branch was opposed to it, but he there was no organized group or organization that was opposed to it. The mayor of Bloomfield was in favor of it. He thought it would bring people shopping into Bloomfield. It would enhance ratables, when in fact later they ended up complaining about losing ratables. South Orange and Irvington were opposed. East Orange and Irvington were opposed to it. They also thought it would relieve traffic on Ridgewood Avenue. And they said that part of it was going to be built in the bed of the abandoned Morris Canal, using that as the right of way so that you wouldn't lose too many readables. Now, one of the reasons East Orange was opposed to it was this was what the Orleton Parkway used to look like. And this is pretty much where the Parkway is today. They built it right down Orleton Parkway. So I don't think they lost very many houses, but they were ruined because they had this huge highway right in the front yard. So by 1952, the detailed route was defined. The original right-of-way, they said, would be 150 feet, but then they said, well, they had to expand it to 250 and then to 300. So it ended up being they needed twice as much property, the width, than they originally planned. So I'm going to take a look at some of the things that were lost in Bloomfield. There were 450 properties that were impacted. 294 of those were improved. They had some kind of house or building on it. They demolished around 200 houses, but they moved somewhere between 52 and 66 houses. The rateables lost were $3 million. That was about $187,000 in taxes lost. That would be $3 billion in today's dollars and about $2 million in taxes. But ironically, in 1953, even though 200 houses were demolished, they had a net gain of 160 houses in Bloomfield. So I was looking to get the tax. This is a tax map. In the tax assessor's office, someone color-coded the tax maps to show where the property was that was being taken by the Parkway. So this is a section, and this shows where this is a section that was built in where the Morris Canal used to be. And as you can see, they needed a lot more property than just the Morris Canal. So these were houses beside of the Gray Snow. They took some of those houses near East Passaic Avenue and Oak Tree Lane. Going a little further north, this was an example of where these were properties that were owned by a developer who was in the process of, surveying the lots, defining the lots, building the streets, and getting ready to build houses. But before they built the houses, the Parkway took that property. And then there was also some vacant property too. There was some just probably what had been farmland or vacant property that just hadn't been developed yet. So this is up near Watchung Avenue, where it's all the Parkway now. So at the time, they were demolishing all these houses. You could buy bathtubs and doors and windows. There was a wrecking company, and they also, Cleveland Wrecking Company, they also sold houses. So you could buy a house fairly cheap. Never found any exact prices, but they were pretty cheap. But you had to pay to move them if you wanted to move one of them. So the newspaper was advertising that houses were for sale. Here's one of the houses that was moved. It was moved. This is where, so the black and white picture is from Bloomfield Revisited, the Arcadia book about Bloomfield. And it shows the house being, after it was moved, they dug out the foundation, built a garage in the basement level, at grade level with the street, and then plopped the house on top of the foundation. These two houses on Montgomery Street, 255 and 253, were moved to that location. And the old Cleveland Wrecking Company was at 12 Lake Street. That whole block went. So again, the tax map, this is right where exit 148 is today. There was a street there called Roosevelt Avenue. and Lake Street. So that whole block was taken near Bloomfield Avenue. Bloomfield Avenue is over there on the right. So the other side of Lake Street, towards the bottom, these houses are still there today. So when you're exiting at 148 and you look over, if you're going northbound, exiting northbound at 148, if you look over to the right, you'll see these houses that were still there. This is one of 5 row houses that were built in Bloomfield. And this is that section of Bloomfield Avenue. So this is Roosevelt Avenue, where it intersected with Bloomfield Avenue. You can see the trolley tracks. And the building that you see next to the car lot was originally the Mertz Hotel. And it later became the Gay 90s. This is what it looked like at the time. And then this is a photograph of it being demolished. You can see over to the left side over here, this is the telephone company building, which is still there today. The Gay 90s relocated up Bloomfield Avenue to the corner of Orange and Bloomfield, and it was later renamed to the Jetty. And then it's not there anymore, but the Bell Security is there now. But there's the phone company office over here on the right. So they moved from the other side of the phone company to the opposite side on Bloomfield Avenue. This is one of the other row houses in Bloomfield. They were built as part of a real estate speculation in the late 1800s, 1870 or 80. They looked sort of like the row houses that you see in Brooklyn, or I lived in an apartment in a building that looked just like this in Philadelphia. They were built before electricity and plumbing. This was Franklin Street, 313 to 333. This is where also sort of near the exit 148, where the Dunkin' Donuts is today, right here, right next to Second River and the Parkway. So these were, they sort of became rundown tenements, and they weren't considered a great loss. So they had flooding problems. A couple of them had fallen, were partially demolished already anyway, but the whole block was removed for the Parkway. And here you can see them under the Parkway under construction in that area. You can see those houses in the background in the upper right-hand corner. So this was Franklin Street here, and you can see that they're building channels to put the river into these channels to direct it, so they could do the construction work and build the Parkway above the river. More construction. Again, this is near Bloomfield Avenue, Franklin Street, near exit 148. And you can see up here in the left-hand corner, the phone company building in the distance. And here it is today down here across from the BMW dealer. There was a Cripps and Sons factory on Bloomfield Avenue, right next to Second River. This is a gas station today, right next to the Parkway. The row of houses that you see in the background, that street back there, is Race Street, which is now Burroughs Place. The building that you see here next to the gas station was a Burroughs office building, and then they named the street next to it Burroughs Place. So this is the tax map for that section. There were quite a few buildings that were torn down here. These are the row houses on Franklin Street. Let's see, Bloomfield Avenue. This is Roosevelt Avenue at Bloomfield. This is where the car lot was. And then Second River, they had to deal with Second River with relocating part of the river and building bridges. So these are what some of the houses looked like on Race Street that were demolished. This was 78 Race Street. These photographs, most of these photographs of the houses came from the Nathan Russell collection. We have, yeah, he was a realtor in Bloomfield and Glen Ridge, and he has a collection of several hundred of glass plate negatives of houses that he took that were for sale in the Glen Ridge Library. I digitized most of those photographs, and they're on our website, the HSOB, Historical Society of Bloomfield, hsob.org. We have a photo gallery with all these houses. There are about 300 from Bloomfield, and a couple hundred in Glen Ridge, and a couple dozen from Montclair on the website, and they're organized by the town and street address. Another photo of Bloomfield Avenue. You can see the trolley tracks and typical storefront on Bloomfield Avenue. That's all Parkway now. I'm not quite sure what this building is, but I think it might be a chicken coop. Now, one of Fred Branch's complaints was one of the most egregious demolitions was this house, which was built by Daniel Dodd, one of the old Bloomfield families. Was on the corner of Franklin and Race. This is what it looked like originally around the time it was built in 1719. Well, the photograph would have been probably late 1800s, another Russell photograph. And it was remodeled to this, what it looked like in the upper right-hand corner. And the house is documented in the Library of Congress in the Historic American Building Survey. And this is the part like an exit ramp, service road exit ramp, where the house used to be, right next to the Parkway. This house was at 284 Montgomery Street. These houses were on Spruce Street, so this whole block of Spruce Street was demolished, and it's the service road and grassy area, right. That's part of the Parkway. It's part of the Parkway service road. So this is an interesting house. The top two photographs are then and now photographs of 24 Fremont. This is our first example of how beautiful you can make your house look with aluminum siding. So this one side of it's on Fremont Street and the other side is on Spruce Street. So the house across the street, the houses across the street here were the ones that were demolished, and they moved one of those houses across the street and conjoined it onto the side of this house with the house with the gambrel roof, and connected it to the house on Fremont Street. And this is what it looks like today. This house was at 15 Spruce Street, right about where the Parkway is today. This was 265 Montgomery. It's now an overpass. Montgomery Street is an overpass there. So when you drive under this railroad bridge, that used to be a train station. It was the Bloomfield station on the Montclair and Greenwood Lake Railroad, which later became the Erie Railroad, which later became the Boonton Line, which is now abandoned, and it's now the Essex Hudson Greenway, which we hope will be, which the state bought it, and it will be turned into a Rails to Trails Greenway. This was Beach Street here. This is a bridge over the Morris Canal that took you to the train station. This is the train trestle under construction after the train station had been demolished. The same area where you can see the bridge under construction, and the building over here is still there. At the time, this building over here on the right was a cigar box factory. It's now Nye auctioneers. There's another view of it. That's what it looked like as the cigar box factory on the top. And they bricked up most of the windows now, but it's still there. So this was one of the photographs you might have seen in some of the promotions. Now, you might be wondering, how did they take a picture like that? It looks like it was taken by a drone. I'm guessing that they took it from a hot air balloon. They did photographs like this from hot air balloons around that time. This was probably late 1800s, maybe 1880, 1890. But this was Williamson Street here. Walnut Street was over here. The street that these houses are on here is Belleville Avenue. This house in the background is the original Oakside, the Oaks family house. And these were houses that were on Belleville Avenue. Here's a later version. This was from 1935, an aerial photograph that would have been taken from an airplane, probably by the Oakses to record their factory. This was the Oaks wool mill and their pond, the Oaks Pond. The original Oaks house was this one on the north side of Belleville Avenue. This is the abandoned Morris Canal, which is now JFK Drive. And Belleville, this is Belleville Avenue through here. This is Oakside as it still exists today on Belleville Avenue. So this is showing about the area where that was taken for the Parkway. These houses were demolished. This house was moved. I'll tell you about, I have some photographs of it. And they actually had to cut a little corner off of one of these Oaks Mill buildings. So this is the north side of Belleville Avenue we were just looking at. There were several houses along there that were demolished. You can see the corner of this apartment building right here. And they built a road here, Memorial Drive, which would have taken you to Oaks Mill. It goes to an apartment development that was named after Oaks Pond, called Oaks Pond. This is one of the other houses that was next door on Belleville Avenue. That's Oaks Mill back there in the background. This was the home of Clarence Richards Schuyler. Schuyler was a big family name in Bloomfield and North Jersey in this area. So this is the house in this picture, that aerial photograph. This is a little close up here. This house was moved. This is what it looked like a few years ago. It was moved to the corner of Beach and Spruce Street. This is another view of Walnut Street. Walnut Street used to be, if you look at Oakside, there's a parking lot towards the Parkway. That used to be Walnut Street. This is another house that was on Walnut Street. You can see the backs of the houses that are on Belleville Avenue over here on the left. This was an interesting house, called the Flannery House. It was built around 1840, and it was originally on Belleville Avenue, but when they built Oakside, it was on the Oaks property on Belleville Avenue, but when they built Oakside, they moved this house onto Walnut Street, where it was for about 60 years. This photograph on the left was 1949. And then this is it when they're doing construction on the Parkway. It was demolished. Now, looking back at the aerial photograph, we're going to look at what these three houses looked like. The first one was 226 Belleville Avenue. This looks very much like Oakside. It was built by the same architect, Charles Granville Jones, who built a number of important government buildings like schools and government office buildings in Bloomfield and Belleville. He designed the high school in Bloomfield High School, and several of the elementary schools. And That's the same house again, but you can see 214 next to it. This is 214 here. This was also built by Charles Granville Jones. It was featured in an architecture magazine as a residence at Montclair. I don't know if there was ever a house like this built in Montclair, but this is a mirror image of this house that was actually built on Belleville Avenue. And you can see that his signature, Charles G. Jones, architect, in the lower left-hand corner. And then 206 Belleville Avenue, this is what it used to look like. This was not demolished for the Parkway. They came up right next to it. I'll show you a picture of the construction coming up. But this was later, you might remember this as the Murray Quinn Funeral Home. This is our second example of how beautiful you can make your house with aluminum siding. So this is the house right up here. It was right on the precipice of the edge of the Parkway. This is Belleville Avenue. The bridge here is Belleville Avenue, and you can see Oaks Mill in the distance there. I'm grateful to Betty Kish. A woman named Betty Kish posted most of these photographs on our Facebook page, and I borrowed them for the ones that show the construction. So here's the Parkway. This is probably, looks from the cars, it was probably in the 60s or 70s. This is what the Parkway used to look like. And this shows Oaks Mill. This is where that apartment complex is now, but this is the section of building that had the corner cut off to fit the Parkway there. This is the toll booth right up here, Essex toll booth. And this is under construction, where you can see that they cut off a section of the building and built a new wall there. Now, this is another interesting house moving story. This is Broad Street up near where Broad Street, if you go straight, you'll be on West Passaic Avenue. So the green area is the Parkway, the property that they bought. This is also another example of where the Morris Canal was used. A very small piece of the land that they needed. But they wanted to improve access on Broad Street to build the bridge over the Parkway. So they wanted this property here. There was a house right here, though. So they moved the owners of the house. This is what it used to look like from Broad Street. This is Broad Street looking north. This is looking south. And this picture on the left shows the house in the process of being moved. And the street on the right is McLeod Lane. It had just been laid out with new houses built along it. But the Ward family owned this property on the left-hand side, and they basically moved their house onto a different section of their property. The house on the left is the house shortly after it was moved, showing what McLeod Lane looked like at the time. And then this is what the house on the right-hand side is what the house looks like today, 48 McLeod Lane. Now, Morris Canal Highway. So around the same time that they built the Parkway, they also decided that it would be very convenient, since the Morris Canal had been abandoned since the 1920s and had been sitting around as a vacant ditch. They decided that it would make a good feeder road for the Parkway, and the county ended up building JFK Drive. Originally, when the canal was abandoned, they were going to use it as a high-speed trolley line. It would have, when the canal was abandoned, they offered the property, the state took over the property, and they offered it to the municipalities that it ran through. Newark, Belleville, and Bloomfield all bought theirs quickly. Newark used theirs to build the city subway, which is now the Newark Light Rail. So when you're in the Newark Light Rail, you're pretty much in the path of the Morris Canal. And it could have extended through Bloomfield and up into Patterson. That was the plan, original plan. So Bloomfield and Belleville bought their sections of the canal, hoping that high-speed trolley line would be built in it, but obviously it was never built. But this is a map showing the proposed high-speed line and the stations. You would have Montgomery Street, Belleville Avenue, James Street, Fitzhibbert Street, and so instead of this being built, it just sat there abandoned for 30 years or so. So they authorized the construction in 1954. The township owned the right-of-way of the canal, and they gave it to the county. Also, they took 1/3 of an acre of Foley Field, deeded to the county for the highway for JFK Drive. And it opened in 1955. This was also done to alleviate some of the traffic problems, especially on Broad Street. So this is what, when the canal was in operation, this was Liberty Street. There was a bridge over the canal at Liberty Street. And today this is the Liberty Street Bridge, which goes over the Parkway. This is the other side of Liberty Street, the Liberty Street Bridge. This is from north of the bridge looking south. So from this point north, JFK Drive is directly in the bed of the Morris Canal. The reason it's got curves in it and the reason it goes up and down, it goes up here to meet the grade of Liberty Street, then it has to go down to go under a railroad bridge, and then it curves around Foley Field where the canal was. This is what the canal looked like when it was abandoned in that period of in the 1940s. This is the other side, the canal side of the cigar box factory, which is now Nye Auctioners. And so people were glad to have some use of the Morris Canal. It was a practical use of it to use it as a highway instead of leaving it as an abandoned ditch. This is the same railroad that we saw before crossing the Parkway, but this is where it crossed the Morris Canal. This was the abandoned ditch in the 40s. You can see a bridge in the distance, which is the Beach Street Bridge, and then way in the distance is the Liberty Street Bridge. And this is what it looks like today at exit 149. So what was it called? So there's been a lot of discussion on Facebook where people are posing the question, what was JFK Drive called before it was called JFK Drive? And the consensus was it didn't have a name. But as far as the county was concerned, they called it Morris Canal Highway. In newspaper articles from 1955, they referred to it as Morris Canal Highway. One of them said the new Canal Highway. This is a map showing Foley Field, which calls it Morris Canal Highway. This is an aerial photograph from 1961 where they call it the Canal Highway. But apparently they didn't promote that name. In 1955, the newspaper published an editorial saying, gee, this is really a shame this highway doesn't have a name. People call it the feeder road, the county feeder road, marginal road, service road. This is what people are saying on Facebook. Well, we used to call it the feeder road. We called it marginal road. We called it the service road. And apparently people didn't call it Morris Canal Highway, even though that's what it was officially called. So they're saying, oh, it's so unromantic for this highway to not have a name. And eventually in the 60s, they named it after John F. Kennedy. So around the building of the Parkway, there were some controversies, a little civil disobedience, and community activists got involved. None of these were about building the Parkway. They were all about what happened after the Parkway was built. So one of them does have to do with building the Parkway. They didn't object to building the Parkway. They just objected to where it was. So the original alignment would have taken the Parkway behind Lindbergh Boulevard, where the state police headquarters is today. It would have been right where the state police headquarters is and over behind the fence there. If they had gone with that alignment, the Parkway would have gone through the Upper Montclair golf course. So they had a choice of whether it was going to cut through the Upper Montclair golf course or whether it was going to cut through Broad Acres golf course. And they ended up, partly because the people on Lindbergh Boulevard complained that they didn't want the highway in their backyard, they shifted the alignment to a western route, which made it cut through Broad Acres golf course. So Broad Acres golf course was 50 acres. It was a farm that was turned into a golf course in 1931 by a guy named Robert Axt. In researching newspaper articles, I thought I would find more complaints about people not liking the amount of money that they were offered for that property. But the only case I found was this one. They offered Axt $100,000 for 15 acres. They wanted 15 acres of the golf course for the Parkway. He sued and said, you know, you're putting my golf course out of business. You have to compensate me for that. So he settled for $163,000. So he had 35 acres left that he couldn't use as a golf course because it was too small. So he sold them for $500,000, which would be about $5 million in today's dollars. And he sold it to Colgate-Palmolive. They were planning to build a research campus there. This is the architect's rendering of it, a 35-acre research campus planned in 1957. They even got up to planning the groundbreaking ceremony, and people were waiting for this groundbreaking ceremony, but it never happened. They had a reorganization called Colgate-Palmolive, and they decided not to build it. So they owned this property. And what they decided to do, instead of building their research campus, they proposed 4 21-story high-rise apartment buildings. This is what the proposal looked like. This was a brochure that was developed by complainants who said, you know, this is what a typical house looks like in the neighborhood. This is what the Statue of Liberty looks like, and these are what these apartment buildings are going to look like in your backyard. So when they had the first zoning board meeting, 1,200 people showed up at the zoning board meeting to protest the high rises. They had to move the meetings to the high school auditorium, and they held 13 special hearings. So in 1962, the apartment plan was rejected by the zoning board. Colgate-Palmolive started to appeal, but they decided to drop their appeal in 1963. In 1964, Fairleigh Dickinson purchased the property, and we're thinking about building a college campus there. That didn't go through, and in 1966, the Loomis Company bought. They built on 20 acres an office complex that's where Universal Technical Institute is today, and Loomis still has office space in that building. And in 1970, they subdivided the rest of the property into and they built 3 other buildings, which are on what's called Broad Acres Drive now, which is north of the ShopRite that you drive past when you're going up that section of the Parkway. So it seemed like a lot of people somehow got the idea that there weren't going to be any tolls in Bloomfield. I never found any place where it said, where the Parkway, the Highway Authority said, you know, Bloomfield is going to be toll free. It seemed to be what I found in one newspaper article about it said it was commonly believed. There were some things that were commonly believed, which I interpret as sort of somebody's uncle's cousin said, hey, it's going to be free in Bloomfield. But there was no plan of it being toll free. AAA, New Jersey AAA was opposed to it. They wanted a commuter rate. And the union that was at Westinghouse was opposed to it, opposed to tolls. They thought it should not cost as much, but they didn't get anywhere. The Highway Authority continued with the toll program. And another common belief was that the Parkway, the state or the Parkway or the Highway Authority was going to reimburse Bloomfield for the ratables that they lost. And one of the councilmen in Bloomfield said, we're going to get tough with the Parkway. We're going to require that they reimburse us. But that didn't go anywhere either. They never got reimbursed, any kind of reimbursement. They never reimbursed anybody for the land that they took. So there was a little bit of controversy about the service areas. The original service area at Brookdale, which has been renamed after Connie Chung, this is now a Connie Chung rest stop, was originally a Howard Johnson's. This is what it looked like under construction, open 24 hours a day. The people in the Brookdale area wanted to be able to have access to Howard Johnson's from Broad Street. So they petitioned the Parkway for access and they got it. There has been, ever since then, you could access the service area from Broad Street. It was Howard Johnson's, then it was a McDonald's, and the latest controversy is that it's going to be a Chick-fil-A. If you remember Howard Johnson's, this is what the interior looked like, typical Howard Johnson's on the Turnpike or Parkway. They had Thanksgiving dinners. So in 1954, the other controversy was the Parkway wanted to build a restaurant on the other side, on the northbound side. So neighbors started a suit to prevent that from being done. It went to the state Supreme Court. The neighbors said, this is a residential neighborhood. You can't build a restaurant in a residential neighborhood. And the Supreme Court said, this is not a residential neighborhood. It is the Garden State Parkway. And they're immune from your local zoning regulations. So the citizens said they were going to appeal, but they decided to make it a gas station only and not build a restaurant there. And it has been a gas station ever since then, except that they also built the state police headquarters there too. Then in 1994, the Parkway again wanted to build a restaurant in that location on the opposite side where the gas station was. And a group of people organized, they were referred to as the Big Beefers because it was going to be a McDonald's. And they claimed that there was an original, in 1954, that this controversy about building a restaurant there, they claimed that the Parkway had an agreement that they would never build a restaurant there. I tried to find a memo or something that said that. I never did find it, but they claimed that there was an agreement to not build a restaurant, so the Parkway didn't build the restaurant. There were people who lived near the Parkway who wanted a fence. They thought it was unsafe for children that they were going to run out into the Parkway. So in 1955, a group of people who lived on Palmer Street organized a work gang to protest that there were no fences. And the mayor and council in 1955 barricaded ramps to demand safety fencing, and the highway authority did erect the fencing. So they did a little experiment in 1956. They tried the honor system for the toll booths in a couple areas. So the average toll collection at these honor system toll booths was 82%, but in Bloomfield it was 60%. Well, I think that might be partly because people had this idea that it was supposed to be free or they didn't have to pay for it. But they stopped the honor system. They also planned an expansion of the Essex toll. They were going to build a parking deck and office buildings in that area, but neighbors complained, and they didn't do that expansion. They expanded the toll booths, but they didn't do the rest of the expansion back in '88. So what about the future? So Bloomfield Center Alliance, I mean, everybody complains about how ugly it is at exit 148 and that whole area underneath there that's just barren. It's mostly used for the Parkway to store equipment. So Bloomfield Center Alliance commissioned somebody to come up with some ideas for how they could use lighting and signage to make that look better. And these are some of the ideas that they had. This, by the way, this is the phone company building that's there now at exit 148. But the Parkway said, this is our property and we don't want you to do this. So the plans haven't gone anywhere. But it certainly would be nice if we could do this someday, still hoping that we might be able to do it. So that's it. A lot of people helped contribute to this, and that's all I have for now. And I'll take some questions if anybody has questions.
Thank you, Rich. Quite a busy chat. I'm just going to read a few comments that came in while you were presenting. So Michael D had two, and actually quite a few people remember as the Parkway was being built. So some very nice recollections. So Michael said he grew up in the 1940s and 50s in Upper Montclair, Woodmont Road off Bellevue, the last street in Upper Montclair, as he says, just a half a mile from Broad Street in the Brookdale section of Bloomfield. Route 3 was built in the 1940s, and the Garden State Parkway cut the Upper Montclair Country Club into pieces by the 1950s, as he recalls. He also noted there was an explosion of housing west and north between Bellevue Avenue, the Brookdale area, and Alexander Ave in the early 1950s as the Garden State Parkway was being built. One from our collections manager, Aaron Benz, is were the islands really meant to be places for picnics? I think that had to do with the video you were showing us.
They did have, I read a number, they actually had a certain number, like 40 or 50 picnic areas.
Yeah.
That they eliminated. Originally they did, but they eliminated.
And
those nicely landscaped islands in between, a lot of them just shrunk down as they widened the highway more and more. They shrunk so that there aren't very many of them left anymore. I wasn't sure how many Montclair people were going to be interested in the Parkway because it doesn't go through Montclair. Luckily, you're lucky it didn't go through Montclair. You have the benefit of having an exit that's named for Montclair at 151. So it does definitely did impact Montclair.
Sure. One interesting question is, why were some houses moved and others demolished? If you have any insight into that.
As far as I know, if somebody wanted to buy a house and they bought it and wanted to move it, they would move it. If it didn't sell, it'd probably get torn down. I don't know that they, had any plan for how that was done.
Right. A lot of other comments just saying that someone remembers the apartment buildings at Watsessing Park, which are still standing. A lot of thank yous for a good presentation. And someone that walked over the footbridge to Demarest because of the Garden State Parkway. A question from Ira Smith. Did you say none of those who lost property were compensated by the state? Is that correct?
No, so everybody got a fair, what was a fair market value for their house, what was considered a fair market value. People had to sell their property because it was taken through eminent domain. But that people got compensated for their houses at what they were appraised at. What I said was that I didn't hear of anybody complaining. Anybody saying, "Oh, my house is worth a lot more than that, so I want more money." I didn't hear any of those objections except the one guy who wanted more money for the golf course. And also, the other person who complained was the developer who laid out. He drained a swamp and planned roads and was planning to build houses in that area near Watchung Avenue. He put a lot of money into draining the swamp and putting the drainage pipes and putting in the infrastructure for the housing. He was only paid for vacant land. Because they didn't have buildings on them, he didn't get the money that they would have given to somebody if you had a house on your property. They had a different, it would have been appraised as a vacant property, and he got a low amount. He didn't get compensated for all the work that he had put into the property.
Interesting. Hi Nancy. For a comment from her was that her mom, Mary Travis Arney, one of the Montclair History Center's founders, took her for a ride on the Parkway at Watchung Ave to Bloomfield the first day it opened. So I'm sure that was quite an experience. Another question from Joanne, was it always planned to have tolls on the Parkway?
So this is another controversy, another commonly believed idea that was planned to be a toll road, and that tolls were going to pay for it instead of people, tax dollars, having to pay for it. But some people had the idea that after it was paid off, they were going to eliminate the tolls. So I never saw the Parkway. I never saw that the highway authorities said they were going to do this. There were some other states where they did something similar. I knew of bridges, or they might have a toll bridge, and they said when we pay it off, we won't have a toll anymore. I knew of some of those instances. And I think people applied that idea to the Parkway, but I didn't see any evidence that the Parkway ever said they were going to eliminate tolls. And if you think about it, if they didn't have tolls, it would have become a state highway, and we would have had to pay tax dollars to maintain it. So it has taken quite a lot of money to maintain it. They've done a lot of widening and rebuilding and repaving, and that's all paid for by the tolls.
Right. And there was a similar question that just came in, but I think you answered part of this. Was there ever a plan to eliminate the tolls over time? And it sounds like that's not the case. So,
well, it was commonly believed that they would be eliminated, but I never found evidence that they said they were going to eliminate.
Right. Just more people sharing. Marie grew up in the 60s and 70s. We took the Parkway to the shore, remembers there was the Howard Johnson restaurants on the island that were accessible in both directions. Pam also noting, so sad many old beautiful homes are demolished. I mean, I'm sure that's what we all were thinking about when we're looking at so many of these images. And Marie shared an image for anyone curious to click and look. It's the scene of the Watsessing Park and the apartment buildings by the Parkway, if anyone would like to see that. I think I got the chat caught up to speed. If anyone wants to unmute and ask any other questions to Rich or put more in the chat, I can keep an eye on there, but please go right ahead.
Yeah, there were the apartments near that are called Troy Towers near Watsessing Park. And there's also a couple of large high-rise apartment buildings in Clifton, right off the Parkway.
Absolutely. I just clicked on the image myself. Thank you, Marie, for that. And that looks like it's a painting. So Thank you. Anyone else want to share anything they remember about seeing the Parkway be built? Oh, Roberta, I see you there. Hold on, I'm going to ask to unmute you there. You might have to click a button.
It's not the Parkway. It was Route 180. My house was on 180. My brother bought it for very little money and had it moved. What they don't tell you when you have it moved is that all the walls and ceilings crack. So those houses that were moved probably had deficits that had to be repaired when they put on new land. So it's true of this house.
Yeah, somebody said it cost almost as much to move a house as it did to build a new one. So it wasn't cheap to move them, and you would have not to mention, I mean, the plumbing and the electrical and all that stuff that would have to be redone, and walls cracking, and
it was cheap to buy, but and you had to fix it to live it in.
Yeah, pay to move it.
And I also noticed on the Parkway, maybe not in this area, that it goes through graveyards. What happened to the graves?
Yes,
that the Parkway went through.
My understanding, well, especially in East Orange, that section that you go through a cemetery, they said they moved the graves. They had open space in the cemetery, and they moved them out of the way. There's a cemetery in Bloomfield that had its little corner of it cut off too, but they said they moved the graves. They were supposed to.
I like how you framed that with "supposed to," Rich.
They did.
Thanks, Roberta. Anyone else like to ask or share any memories of what they recall?
Well, I want to say something else that somebody told me that the Parkway was actually an old beaver trail that, before there was a lot of civilization, that this was the path the beavers took through New Jersey. Don't know if that's true or not.
I never heard that one.
Yeah.
It was a lot of it was the Morris Canal in Bloomfield, and there were a couple Indian trails in Bloomfield.
Mhm.
I don't think I never heard of the Parkway being one of them. Jim has his hand raised.
Yep, I see that too now. Go ahead, Jim.
Hi there. I was curious. I saw the photographs of a lot of the houses that you showed. Were those photographs taken around the time that the highway was built, or were those photographs taken, sometime beforehand? Because, I mean, they all look like they were in pretty remarkable condition, and I'd be kind of surprised if they were torn down looking like that. I mean, a lot of highways that were built in the 50s and 60s went through neighborhoods that were kind of struggling, and I don't know if that was the case here or not.
Well, yeah. So, good question. The photographs were taken around early 1900s. So you're right and many of them, because Nathan Russell took these photographs because he had houses for sale. Many of them were new houses, so they had just been built, and the photograph would have been of this just built house. So what happened was, I would see these photographs, and I would say 238 Montgomery Street, and I'd look on a map and say, well, what's there now? Oh, this is where the Parkway is. Or I'd find these houses on Spruce Street. I'd look at we have a 1938 map, which has all these things on it. But as you saw from the picture of that nightclub, which was called the Gay 90s, it wasn't in great shape by the time it was demolished. So those houses were much better looking in the photographs than they probably were at the time they were demolished. And you also saw the example of that, the Victorian house that was turned into a funeral home, and you saw what it looked like when it was demolished. So yeah, it was a little. I wasn't trying to be deceptive. It just happened to be the photographs that we had of those houses, and when they were probably new, they probably didn't look that good when they were demolished.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Any other questions, thoughts? Feel free to unmute, raise your hand.
And I love then and now pictures. I did the book Bloomfield Through Time is then and now pictures. Many of these houses, the editor said, don't give me pictures of blacktop. So they didn't want pictures that showed the Parkway or a parking lot. So I had to avoid using some of those pictures. But and then we have a collection of those photographs on our website too, the Historical Society of Bloomfield.
Great. Thank you so much, Rich, for your knowledge and wonderful presentation this evening. It was definitely quite an interesting topic for all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Everybody.